truth. The PTO cylinder, we'll see what we get. No need to hold the throttle open, we have no carbs on it. And that is reading 170, which I'm more than happy with. Now our mag cylinder. Seems to be a lot of compression. And that is reading as well, probably 165. I'm very pleased with that. So we cleaned up the ridges inside the carb flanges. They're not perfect, but they'll do. So we'll put a little splash of silicone on here. We don't want any air leaks in this area. And just bolt these on lightly and let the silicone set up for a little while. Almost time for another tube of silicone. One little thing I found out, I always found that my silicone would dry out way before the tube was used up. And I tried different ways of sealing the cap. But so far, or lately, what I've been doing is stretching a piece of nitrile mechanics gloves over the top and screwing the lid on. And you know, it seems to not dry out as fast. So give that a try. Kind of ugly. So we have rebuilt a pair of 34mm carbs. They're clean, and I'll have to look up the specs for the slides and the pilot jet. But we are lacking one float bowl gasket, which I might have some new old stock stuff. Now these carbs probably should have been dipped in the ultrasonic bath, which I don't own yet, but I'm sure we'll get them clean. Anyway, we'll go looking for a float bowl gasket and put these together. Next step, we've got some intact carb flanges. They're not cracked, and they're the right ones, but I noticed there's a little bit of bubbling of the rubber right in this area, on both of them in fact. So I think we'll take the die grinder and smooth that down just a little bit for performance. And I have put some silicone in these just so the transition isn't rough. I think I've got some clamps somewhere. So anyway, we should be able to put some carbs on this beast sometime today. Now, according to the service manual, the Polaris service data for 79, I'm going to 79 specs, we should have a throttle valve cutaway of a 2.5, and the needle should be a 6DH7-2. Now, before I put all this together, we should try to get it right. Now, this snowmobile will probably end up on a vintage drag race track, so I don't think there'll be a whole bunch of mid-range action except for coming back on the return lane. So we'll just try to get it right. So on the bottom of the slide there's a number, and that's a 2 in this carb. And I can't remember which is leaner or which is richer. The lower the number, the richer the mixture. And this slide cutaway affects the operation of just off idle. If you ever find a snowmobile with a Mikuni that you've got to feather the throttle and fart around with it to get to come up to RPM, that's one area I would play with a little bit. And these are available. And this slide as well is a 2. So we'll go looking for a set of 2.5s. The needle, this little number is hard to see, but this is a 6DH7, but there's no dash on it, so I think we'll be in the ballpark with the needles. So I'll go and dig in my bin of slides and see if we have a set of 2.5s. The other thing is sometimes the carburetors had the idle adjustment screw on the other side, and so all these slides are not interchangeable, but generally among the Polaris stuff, the idle screw is on the right hand side of the carburetor facing the carb, this here. So we'll go digging. So unfortunately, all I can find is either 2 slides or 3s and 3.5s. We don't have any 2.5s without robbing another sled. So we'll go run with these. So we tightened these carb flanges. We found some clamps. We'll mount the carbs for now. We found a choke cable. Looks like a throttle cable is being a bit elusive at this point, but I'm sure we'll find one. Seems sturdy enough. Had a bit of a time finding a choke cable that would work, something close to the proper length, and I had to find some of these fittings that fit the carbs. There are slight differences. Anyway, we've got choke action, and to adjust these I just adjust them so they're lightly seated in the bore, and then tighten the threads down and tighten the lock nut, because then it, well, that one's not even tight yet, because you don't want the chokes to be open at all, but you want full choke when you're cranking it on a cold day. So seem to have that. We've jury-rigged a throttle cable. I cannot find a throttle cable that gives me the right travel. I'm pretty sure this is off an old TXL. It's an old jobber cable. It's not giving us full throttle, which is no good for performance. But anyway, it's we'll have to order one from Rec Supply if they've got such a thing. But we'll throw a spring on the exhaust pipe. We found, I think it's the proper exhaust pipe, and we don't have a clutch on it yet. I don't advise running a motor without a clutch on it because of the flywheel effect. But we're just about out of time this morning, and we'll give it a fire up and see if it goes. Just one spring to make sure the pipe don't jump off on us. These things are pretty loud without. And we're not mounted in here quite properly yet, so. We have no fuel in the fuel tank and no fuel lines on yet, so this is just I like to do this kind of thing just to see if it sputters and fires, because we got to start from ground zero again. We don't want to do too much extra work. So exhausts are on, carbs are on. We checked for spark earlier. We have a little magic concoction of two-stroke oil and gasoline here. Kill switch on. A little bit. So I'm going for the multicolored fuel line look. This is probably original fuel line, and I will change that before we go racing. But I've got some solid blue stuff for the pulse line, and we've got some nice clear for the feed to the carbs, so nothing like style. We should clamp these as well, but whoops. They never seem to pull off when you want them to, and they will pop off when you don't. So. Wasn't too generous with my lengths. Another thing that we've noticed is the eccentric locking collar on this bearing is walked off, and the race is actually broken in there, and we've got a little bit of slop. So I don't think the bearing turns nice, but we will fix this. We've got a bearing here that we can pop in there. Unfortunately, the bottom bolt is up in the above the track, and it's pretty hard to get at. So we might save this job. We're gonna take the track apart and put new cleats on because we've got some broken cleats. So anyway, we'll deal with that then, I suppose. So we've thrown some 40-to-1 synthetic two-stroke oil with some premium in here, and instead of pulling my arm till it pulls out of the socket, I'll just put a little air in the tank, and if we pull one fuel line off, hopefully we can push that through. There's no shut-off on here, but I also don't see any fuel coming through, so what the heck? So we've primed these carbs, and it only sputters, so I finally got fuel to the carbs from the gas tank, and with some choking it seems to run, so we'll give that another try. I did have to put some oil in the cylinders, maybe the rings weren't quite sealing. Ouch. Kill switch. Whoops. Now what? Oh, too much choke. stock C. Now I'm fairly certain this sled won't have the right gear ratio for a 440 TX. It's probably geared more like a 250, which it was. Or lower, who knows. So we're going to shoot for 19 on the top and 39 on the bottom. And I have a good selection of those gears in storage. So we'll just take a look. I see that the little bolt holes are stripped out on this. Somebody's been monkeying around. I think I know who. Anyway, there's really no nice way to get this apart without spilling the oil. And there must be a liberal amount of silicone being used here too. There we go. Chain is a little loose. Looks like it's a 39 on the bottom, pretty small guy on the top, so we'll take that apart. Oh, should have done this before I took the chain tether off, I guess. Now we're losing shims. So we're 11 wide, 39 tooth on the bottom. Fairly teeny little gear on top. 15. Sounds like standard gearing for a TX250. I know. There's my wife Grace. She brought me some coffee.
Cheers.
Isn't that nice? Thanks, Grace.
You're welcome.
So we found a 19 tooth gear that fits the top shaft, and a couple things that should be done here. We should make sure that the gears line up with each other. If we could just get them to start. Now the shims are in there, the shims that were equipped. And I was lucky to obtain a nice straight piece of aluminum, so the idea is to lay this across and make sure that we are lined up, and it would appear that we're not all that great right at this point. So it might take a shim or two on the bottom gear. And I'm surprised. I thought these would have lined up. It could be a little difference in the sprocket, I suppose, but we need a shim on the bottom sprocket to get it out, unless it fell off when we pulled it out. I think one fell out. So we'll dig around in our box of shims and see what we can come up with. So we found another shim. It'd probably almost do the trick. We'll slide him on, reinstall the bottom sprocket, and just see. We're still a little bit out. So one more shim. And that does make me a little nervous why we're running this sled with that much of a misalignment. But I hope that the jack shaft hasn't pulled that way, or the drive shaft hasn't pulled away. Anyway, there we could shim a little more, but I think once we tighten the bolts it'll be all right. Yeah, that's actually good there. Now the other trick is to make sure that our chain is long enough. The chain that was on here, I'll have to count the number of links, but it was, well, there goes a shim already. No wonder these things happen. The chain was in with the 15-tooth top sprocket, so there is a chance that we might have to go looking for a chain with a couple more links in it. But I can see right now it's not going to go on because the top sprocket isn't anywhere close, so we'll count the number of pins in the chain. It's probably 64, and we'll have to go to 66. So as we suspected, the other chain was a 64 pin, and what I go by is the number of pin links, not the plates but the pins themselves. And we went and found a 66, so this should pop on. I read in a magazine where if you tighten these as tight as you could with a finger tight, you're approximately right. I suppose that's true for a lot of things, but tighten the jam nut. As I said, our brakes are not working right now, so it's a bit hard to tighten that. Lots of slop in that disc brake too. There, we're ready for race day. Just and get it repaired. There. Now luckily on these Polaris chain cases there's a little very small screw. It takes a 5/16 wrench to loosen the head. I don't know what the thread would be, 832 or something. That tells you when you have enough oil in it. I wish the Merc had that, and I have put these little check plugs in the Merc sleds. I've got some, I buy bulk or 10-liter jug of synthetic gear oil, so we'll just put a few ounces in there and hopefully it stays in. Seems to be taking more oil than I would think. There we go. I don't know if 80-90 gear oil just naturally smells bad or whether they put an odorant in it. Okay,